This is what people want. This is what everybody else gets to have in other countries. Except the richest country in the world, because we have corrupt pieces of it, like Nancy Pelosi as our leaders, and then other people who consider themselves left wag their finger at you to say you have to support Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi's my enemy, and I'll never support her.
What's wrong with our politics today? And it's that the corporations have a stranglehold on our politicians, and they don't represent us. Because the Democrats are now Republicans, and this isn't hyperbole. This isn't an exaggeration.
Believe that. The truth of the matter is that my policies are so mainstream that, you know, if I had said the same policies that I have back in the 1980s, I'd be considered a moderate Republican. I mean, you know.
That's the first black president ever elected in the United States, because they're both owned by the corporations. Half the country's poor or low income, and he's out here bragging that he's a moderate Republican. Well, why the f*** vote for you then? We voted for an alternative to moderate Republican. She's the leader. Now, as you know, Nancy Pelosi, extremely unpopular, and she's worth over $100 million. She got rich while she was in power, which is a horrible thing. The Democrats have revealed that they don't have a message. They don't have a plan. In fact, they're just corporatists. There's no point to that party. So they came out with this thing called the Better Deal. It's not the New Deal. Remember, FDR had a New Deal. We knew concrete. He'd start Social Security, give people jobs. Very clear what he was going to do. So here's Nancy Pelosi. And if you, by the way, if you woke Bernie Sanders up out of a sound sleep and you asked him, hey, what are your core principles? What are you fighting for? He could tell you. Single payer health care, free college, living wage. You wake me up out of a sound sleep, I can give it to you. Here's the leader of the Democrats in the House. She's been the leader for a long time. Doesn't care. They have no plans to win workers back except pablum. They have empty platitudes. And by the way, they can't even remember what they are. Here's Nancy Pelosi. She's going to try and talk about the better deal, and she can't even remember what it is because it's nothing, and it comes from nowhere. And here she is. She has to literally read it off a brochure. Her core message, she has to read it off a brochure like it's the first time she ever saw it. Here we go.
Families economically. So that takes us to the better deal. It's about better jobs. The better deal is about...
She literally is holding the pamphlet in her hand, and she literally had to take her sunglasses off so she could read what it is. What's the better deal about? Well, I really want you to tell you because you're going to be hearing a lot more, but she's looking for the pamphlet as she's saying that. She's filling time. And then she gets it and she holds it up. She has to take off her sunglasses so she can read it so she can find out what her party's core message is. The leader.
Better jobs, better wages, better future, higher.
Oh, my God. Hey, what are some of the things that regular people are concerned about? If somebody gives me a pamphlet, I'll figure it out. She's reading this as if let's just let her read it a little bit more. But she's reading this as if she's talking to a bunch of kindergartners and telling them what's in their gift bag, and she doesn't know what half the candy bars are. That's how she's reading this.
It's about better jobs, better wages, better future, higher pay, equal pay, lower cost.
What does lower cost mean, Nancy? Lower cost. Lower cost? She read it off the pamphlet. Doesn't mean anything. Now she's going to try to pretend what that means.
Lower cost to people. Well, let's see. One thing we could lower costs is prescription drugs. Lowering the cost of prescription drugs and ending drug prices.
She can't even speak. She's a bad speaker. I don't know if something's happened later in her life where she's having a problem talking, but she's often slurring her words. Often, just like right now.
If somebody woke me up from a dead sleep and showed me this video and I was just coming to, I'd be like, I don't know who that person is, but they have a job at SNL for life. That is a spot-on Nancy Pelosi impression. Holy, she's just like her.
And again, that she has a way of talking where she doesn't make a point. Everything she says is diluted, convoluted, gets she says things, she mumbles the whole time under her breath. She's one of the worst communicators I've seen in politics.
Well, Jimmy, actually, I think she, I'm sorry, I think she needs a better brochure.
Here we go.
Prescription drugs. Lowering the cost of prescription drugs and ending drug price gouging is a way to lower costs for families. Monopolies.
And how are you going to do that? You're going to have Cory Booker screw you over again when Bernie Sanders introduces that legislation to re-import drugs from Canada? What is your plan to do that, to fight against Big Pharma? What is your plan to do that? Nothing.
I just want to also show you. So let's just go down this really quickly. Let's go down this list of stuff that she is saying is not mainstream. This is what Nancy Pelosi, they want you to believe. Medicare for All is only not mainstream in Washington, D.C. and inside cable news green rooms. That's the only place it's not mainstream, because if you go to Americans, Republicans are for Medicare for All, Democrats and independents. 70% of Americans are for Medicare for All. 63% are for a $15 minimum wage. 60% of Americans are for tuition-free college. 81% support a Green New Deal. 59%, almost 6 out of 10 Americans support a 70% top marginal tax rate. This is mainstream stuff, baby. This is the majority of American stuff. And Nancy Pelosi is your enemy just like Trump is your enemy. Nancy Pelosi is your enemy just like Trump is your enemy. And if you vote for Nancy Pelosi, you're a chump. Because she's the one who's keeping you from this stuff. The Democrats are what's called controlled opposition. And you see what happened? You see how they got Nancy Pelosi? Do you see how they got Representative AOC, Pramila Jayapal? Everybody supported her. Nancy Pelosi for speaker. And then what is the point? 72% of Americans support expanding Social Security. 72% of Americans support expanding Social Security. So this goes to show you we live in an oligarchy. Your democracy has already been stolen from you. This idea that Russia somehow hacked our democracy has been hacked by Wall Street, big oil, and big pharma. That's who hacked our democracy. Johnson & Johnson and Boeing and Goldman Sachs. That's who hacked our democracy. We don't have a democracy, because if we did, we'd have this a long time ago. But we don't have this. Why? Because we don't have a democracy, and voting doesn't matter right now. And if you don't think these people are getting ready to cheat you again, you're wrong. They're already cheating us right now. I mean Democrats. And I mean Republicans. Republicans don't have super delegates and rig their primaries. You know who does? Democrats.
To run for president to bring about this change. We're not naive to the challenges that lay before us, or the obstacles that are placed ahead of us, or the smear tactics that are used against us. Yes, it's coming from within our own party. The most attacks I get are not from Republicans. They're from Democrats. They're from people in the mainstream media. They are from people in the foreign policy establishment that you're talking about. People who represent the interests of the military-industrial complex.
And if you're one of the people who think that Bernie lost fair and square, you're probably super dumb and went to, I don't know, you probably went to an Ivy League school to get your journalism degree. If you think Bernie lost fair and square and you don't know that he was the victim of the biggest election fraud in the history of our country, if you, with a straight face, could look into a TV camera and say Bernie lost fair and square like you're a grown-up, I'm guessing you went to Columbia School of Journalism. And you probably pushed a conspiracy theory first. So this is what people want. And this is how you get Trump. When you deny this to people, that's how you get Trump. Because if people's lives were going great, they wouldn't have voted Donald Trump. And how do I know that? Because I talked to people in Virginia. I talked to coal miners. I talked to cooks at Waffle Houses. That's how I know it. How do you know it? You talked to anybody in a TV green room lately who can give you the insight onto voting habits of people who work in coal mines? So that's what, let's keep going. 62% of Americans want to legalize marijuana. 65% want to reform our incarceration system. 63% want same-sex marriage freedom. 69%, that's 7 out of 10, want to keep Roe versus Wade. 75% think immigration is good. 75% of Americans think immigration is good. 83% want net neutrality. 61% want to help stop climate change. 77% want campaign finance reform, which is not what the Democrats want. Oh, we want to get rid of Citizens United. Almost 6 out of 10 Americans want to break up the big banks. We already have a super majority. No. Tax the rich more. 76% are tax. 64% want a guaranteed jobs program. 76 want taxing the rich. 67 taxing big corporations more. And almost 9 out of 10 Americans want to use the military only as a last resort.
Where is the conversation about peace? Every time we launch these interventionist regime change wars, it is not only our veterans who pay the price for that. Every single one of us pays the price. We have spent trillions of your taxpayer dollars to pay for these wars, taking those dollars away from our communities and our people who need them right here at home.
Here it is. Here's what he's concerned about Democrats. Want to know what he's concerned about?
So many voices within the Democratic Party are going so far to the left, and I ask myself, how are we going to pay for all these things?
So that's what he asked himself. How is he going to pay for all these things? So let me just give you the rundown. Things we cannot afford: healthcare, infrastructure, public transport, education, renewable energy, clean environment, feeding the poor, and public elections. Can't afford it. They can afford it in every other country that has the wealth that we have, or less wealth than we have. They can all afford it. But a guy who was a CEO of Starbucks, who, by the way, got people to pay $5 for a 50-cent cup of coffee on the regular, somehow he can convince people to have breakfast as a coffee drink. I mean, have dessert for breakfast as a coffee drink, but somehow we can't have health care. Here's the things we can't afford. The things we can't afford: Iraq and Afghanistan wars, $4.6 trillion. Wall Street bailout, $12.8 trillion. Big oil subsidies, and an F-35 program, which is $1.5 trillion that nobody wants. That's from American reformers. You want to see what we can afford? Here's what we can afford. 600, that, by the way, that's more now. So they just all got together, decided that wasn't enough money we were spending, more than the next 8 countries combined. That wasn't enough. We're now spending more. We're now spending close to $700 billion a year on war. That's 40% more than we were spending at the height of the Iraq war. We're now spending 40% more. Nobody ever said, how are we going to afford that? I'm worried about my friends on the left and the right. How are we going to pay for all that war? No one ever asked that question. They just spend an extra $80 billion per year they gave to Trump, who's supposed to be a maniac that we're not supposed to let near the nuke button, except we're going to give him $80 billion more for bombs, and then we're going to attack him from the right when he doesn't bomb enough. So that's called the corporate capture of our government. Military-industrial complex has a stranglehold on our government, and you can't have health care, so they can have that. You can't have free college, so they can have that. Do you see what China spends? China spends barely a quarter what we're spending. Russia, look at Russia. It's like a joke. Russia doesn't even spend total what we're giving Trump extra. We just gave Trump extra $80 billion a year. They're spending $69.2 billion. By the way, this graph comes from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. Want to see the next after that is Saudi Arabia. They pay $63 billion, and then after that is India. They pay $55 billion. That's what we're spending. Why can't we? How are we going to afford this? How are we going to afford stuff? So that was the CEO of Starbucks. Hey, I'll take a right-wing talking point latte with a double shot of BS. Make it a venti.
That the left wing of the Democratic Party is further right than the right wing of the right-wing party in Australia.
Yes.
Like the rightest right wing.
Yes, what Bernie Sanders, if he was a politician in Norway, he would be considered a centrist.
Yeah, a centrist.
A centrist. Because the things that he's advocating are taken for granted. I just came back from Norway. Everybody has health care. Everybody has vacations. Everybody has a living wage. And everybody has free college. Not only everybody who lives in Norway, but if my kids wanted to go to Norway, they would also have free college.
Well, Norway.
But how are we going to afford that? Go ahead.
Well, the one thing, before you start waxing poetic on how great Norway is, they're not dropping 120 bombs a day the way the U.S. is.
No, they're not. You are correct.
We're leading the race in democracy, Graham. I hope you remember.
You're a true patriot.
So here is the Jeff Bezos of Asia, Jack Ma. So he runs Alibaba, which is the Amazon of Asia. And they asked him, hey, what the hell's, why is America so effed up? They're the richest country in the world, and half their country's poor. And he says this. Here's what he
Past
said.
30 years, the American had 13 wars, spending $14.2 trillion. The money going there. What if they spend a part of that money on building up the infrastructure, helping the white collars and the blue collars? No matter how strategic good it is, you're supposed to spend money on your own people.